I woke up on a bathroom floor I didn't recognize. The tiles were cold against my cheek. My vision was swimming, and my daughter-in-law was kneeling beside me, holding my wrist, speaking urgently into her phone. It happened again. Yes, the watch is still on him. No, he hasn't removed it once. I tried to move, tried to ask what was happening, but my body felt disconnected from my mind. She glanced down at me, and her expression shifted, concern mixed with something I couldn't quite name, something that made my skin crawl even through the fog in my head. "Don't try to get up, Richard," she said gently. "We're here for you. Everything's going to be okay." Before I continue this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment below and let me know your city or country. I read every single one, and it helps me understand who's listening to what happened to me. It makes this feel less lonely, knowing you're out there. One thing I need to say up front, and I want to be completely transparent with you. Some details in this narrative have been altered to protect identities and for storytelling clarity. Any similarities to specific individuals are purely coincidental, but the core truth of what happened to me, that's absolutely real. And it could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. It could happen to someone you love. Part 2. The Professor. My name is Richard Brennan. I'm 67 years old, and until 2 years ago, I was a college professor in Seattle, Washington. I taught English literature for 38 years at the University of Washington. Shakespeare was my specialty. Though I love teaching everything from Chaucer to contemporary fiction, there's something magical about watching students discover that literature isn't just words on a page. It's a mirror showing them who they are and who they might become. I retired because my wife Margaret convinced me it was time. She said we'd earned it. She said we deserved lazy Sunday mornings and spontaneous road trips down the Pacific Coast Highway, and evenings that didn't involve grading essays until midnight. She was right about that. Margaret usually was right about the things that mattered most. We had exactly 9 months together after I retired. 9 beautiful months of sleeping late, of driving through the San Juan Islands, of cooking elaborate dinners just because we felt like it. 9 months of the life we'd promised ourselves for decades. While we were buried in work and responsibilities, then the stroke took her. It happened while she was reading in the garden on a Tuesday afternoon. She was sitting in her favorite wicker chair, surrounded by the roses she'd planted 15 years earlier, and then she was just gone. The paramedics said it was massive and instantaneous. They said she didn't suffer. People say things like that to comfort you. It doesn't work, not even a little bit. That was 3 years ago. I still live in the house we bought together 32 years back. A Victorian on Capitol Hill with a view of Elliott Bay. It's far too large for one person, but I can't imagine leaving. Every bookshelf holds conversations Margaret and I had. Every window frames memories I'm not ready to let go of. Selling it would feel like erasing her, and I've already lost her once. I can't lose her again. My son David lives in Austin, Texas. He's 39, works in medical device sales, smart, ambitious, inherited his mother's charm, and what I always thought was my tendency toward stubbornness. We were never as close as I wished we could be. Margaret was the translator between us. She understood his silences and could turn them into something that felt like connection. Without her, David and I loved each other, but struggled to show it. We were like two people speaking different languages, with no one left to interpret. So, when David called me last April and said he was flying up with his wife Jessica, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope, purpose. My son was choosing to come home. That had to mean something, right? They arrived on a Saturday morning. David looked healthy, better than I remembered. He'd put on some weight in a good way, looked less stressed than during his last visit. Jessica, whom I'd only met a handful of times at holidays, was polished and warm. She's 36, originally from somewhere in New England, Connecticut, I think, with a background in biotechnology. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person who mattered in the entire room, a kind of intentional warmth that felt almost calculated in its perfection. But I dismissed that thought. I was being paranoid. Grief does that to you. They stayed for lunch. I made Margaret's famous seafood chowder, the recipe David had loved since he was a kid. We talked about Austin, about his work, about their plans to potentially buy a house with a pool. It felt normal. It felt like maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. After lunch, Jessica excused herself to the kitchen to make coffee while David and I sat in the living room. David seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hands, avoiding direct eye contact. That's when I should have known something was wrong. David only fidgets when he's about to say something difficult. "Dad," he said finally, his voice tight, "I need to discuss something important with you." "Of course, son. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Jessica and I have been concerned about you living alone up here. Your age, the isolation, the fact that you're in this big house with no family nearby if something happens." I started to protest, but he held up his hand. "Just listen, okay? Please." And that's when Jessica appeared in the doorway, holding a sleek black box with a silver ribbon tied around it. My life was about to change forever. I just didn't know it yet. Jessica walked into the living room with that box in her hands, and I remember thinking how expensive it looked, the kind of packaging you see in high-end tech stores, minimalist and elegant. "We got you something," she said, her voice soft and caring. "David and I talked about this for weeks, and we really think it could give us all peace of mind." She handed me the box. Inside, nestled in black foam, was a smartwatch. Not just any smartwatch. This thing was sleek, sophisticated, probably cost more than my monthly utility bills. It had a black band and a face that caught the light like polished obsidian. "It's a health monitoring smartwatch," Jessica explained, kneeling down beside my chair so we were at eye level. "It's not available to the public yet. My company is developing it, and I pulled some strings to get you one of the beta units." I turned it over in my hands. It was heavier than I expected, substantial. "That's very thoughtful, but I don't really need—" "Dad, please." David leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. just hear us out. This watch monitors everything. Heart rhythm, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, sleep patterns, even stress indicators. It syncs to an app on our phones. If anything concerning happens, anything at all, we'll know immediately. Jessica picked up where he left off, her voice smooth and rehearsed. Think of it as your personal medical team on your wrist. After what happened to your wife, we just want to make sure you're safe. That if something goes wrong, we're alerted instantly. The mention of Margaret hit me like a punch to the gut. They knew that would work. They knew I was terrified of dying alone the way she did. Suddenly, without warning, without anyone there to help. You wear it 24/7, Jessica continued, taking the watch from my hands and gently fastening it around my wrist. It needs constant skin contact to collect accurate readings. Don't take it off, even to shower. It's completely waterproof, and the battery lasts for weeks. The watch settled around my wrist, cool, smooth, surprisingly comfortable. I looked down at it, then up at my son. David's eyes were pleading. This mattered to him. After 3 years of distance, of awkward phone calls and missed birthdays, my son was here, asking me to let him protect me. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Both of you. This really means a lot. Jessica smiled that perfect smile. You won't even remember it's there, Dad. She was wrong about that. So terribly wrong. But I wouldn't understand just how wrong for several more weeks. David and Jessica returned to Austin that Monday morning. I drove them to the airport. We hugged goodbye, and I watched them disappear through security. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe things were going to be okay between us. But something fundamental had shifted, though I didn't recognize it then. Where before David might call once a month, usually on Sundays, usually brief, now Jessica was calling me daily, sometimes twice a day. Her calls were always warm, always solicitous, always concerned. Good morning, Richard. How did you sleep? The app showed some restlessness around 3 a.m. Were you having trouble? Hi, Dad, just checking in. Your heart rate was elevated during your afternoon walk yesterday. Maybe take it easier. We don't want you overdoing it. At first, I was touched. This was the kind of attention I'd always wanted from David, even if it was coming through his wife. Jessica seemed genuinely invested in my well-being. She made me feel cared for in a way I hadn't felt since Margaret died. Then she started sending recommendations, dietary suggestions, less red meat, more leafy greens, exercise routines, gentle stretching, no more than 30 minutes of walking per day, lifestyle modifications, earlier bedtimes, afternoon naps, reduced caffeine intake. I followed her advice because why wouldn't I? She worked in biotechnology. She understood the human body in ways I didn't, and it all seemed reasonable, helpful even. Then the packages started arriving. The first one came on a Thursday afternoon, delivered by a courier service I didn't recognize. Inside were bottles of supplements with labels I'd never seen before. No brand names, just clinical descriptions. Potassium complex, cardiovascular support formula, cellular optimization blend. Jessica called that evening to explain. Your potassium levels look low based on the watch data, she said. I'm sending you supplements. Take 2 capsules from the green bottle every morning with breakfast. The others are just general support for men your age. How can the watch tell you my potassium levels? I asked. It's incredibly sophisticated technology, she said smoothly. Measures electrolyte balance through skin conductivity. Cutting-edge stuff. Just trust me on this, okay? I did what she asked. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? The capsules were small and green, easy to swallow. I added them to my morning routine alongside my regular multivitamin and my coffee. Just 2 little pills. What harm could they do? 3 weeks after I began wearing the watch and taking those supplements, I woke up one morning feeling wrong. Not sick exactly, but off. Like someone had tilted my internal compass. A few degrees and everything felt slightly misaligned. I was dizzy. Not the spinning kind of dizzy, but a subtle, persistent disorientation. Like the world had shifted slightly off its axis and refused to right itself. I figured it was stress, or age, or grief manifesting in new ways. Bodies do strange things when you're 67 and lonely. I drank extra water, went about my day, and waited for it to pass. It didn't pass. The dizziness became my constant companion. And then came the fog. If you're still with me, drop a quick comment. Let me know you're hearing this, because what comes next is when I started to realize something was very, very wrong. The mental fog crept in slowly, so gradually that I didn't notice at first. It wasn't dramatic memory loss or confusion. It was subtler than that, more insidious. I'd walk into the kitchen and forget why I was there. Stand in front of the open refrigerator for minutes, my mind completely blank. I'd read the same paragraph in a book 3 or 4 times without retaining a single word. I'd sit down to grade some papers for a colleague. I still did occasional consulting work and look up to find that 2 hours had passed and I'd accomplished nothing. Time started to slip. I'd check my watch and it would say 2 p.m. And I'd think, okay, I'll work for an hour. And then I'd look again and it would be 5:30 and I'd have no memory of those 3.5 hours. That's when I started to get scared. My neighbor, Patricia Chin, noticed before I fully understood what was happening. Patricia is 73, a retired physician who lives in the house directly across the street. She's been watching out for me since Margaret died, the kind of neighbor who notices when your newspaper sits on the porch too long, who brings you soup when you're sick, who checks in without being intrusive. She found me standing in my driveway one Tuesday afternoon, just standing there, staring at my car keys like I couldn't remember what they were for. "Richard?" Her voice was gentle but concerned. "Are you all right?" I looked at her and tried to smile, but I could feel how wrong it must have looked. "I'm fine, just tired." "You don't look fine." She came closer, studying my face with a doctor's trained eye. "When's the last time you had a full physical?" I don't know. Maybe a year ago? Everything was normal. "Have you been eating properly? Sleeping?" "I think so." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. The days were blurring together. Patricia's expression darkened. "Come have tea with me." "Right now." I followed her across the street to her house. A cozy craftsman filled with books and the smell of jasmine tea. She sat me down at her kitchen table and really looked at me. "Richard, you've lost weight. Your hands are trembling. Your eyes are unfocused. Something's wrong." I looked down at my hands. She was right. They were shaking slightly. When had that started? "I think maybe it's just the new supplements." My body's adjusting. "Supplements?" Her voice sharpened. "What supplements? Who prescribed them?" Jessica, David's wife. She's in biomedical research. She said my potassium was low. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. How does she know your potassium is low? The watch. I held up my wrist. It monitors everything. She can see all my health data on her phone. Patricia reached across the table and took my hand, turning my wrist to examine the watch more closely. Her fingers were cool and steady, a doctor's hands. Richard, smartwatches can't measure electrolyte levels. That's not possible with current technology. The room seemed to tilt. What?